Hey there, it's Laura Workala again from Laura's Sewing School in Arlington, Massachusetts. So ingenious on YouTube. Oh good, the iron's still on. I have a countdown timer. Actually, you should see this thing. It's a countdown timer, and you can press how long you want your device to be on, and it'll count down and stay off until you turn it on again. It's better than a, what do you call, like a circuit, a timer that keeps going on every 24 hours. This is a gravity feed iron, so it doesn't go out. It stays on the whole time that I'm sewing. And where the heck is my pin cushion? I thought I had it around here. Well, anyway, I'll just pull the pins out. And so again, here's my stitching line here. I sewed from this side so I could make sure that I sewed. It's a little hard to see because I used a light thread, so that I sewed right where the white is. The white and the dark color are coming together, and I sewed over the pins. And so now I'm just going to take those out, find my pin cushion after this. I decided to just bring this over here and do it all on here. So now I was showing you before that I put my arm through here so I can slide it onto my sleeve board. Okay, now let me tell you that there are various ways. If you don't have a sleeve board, these are just so worth it. But this has a wide side and a narrow side. Really cool thing, if you don't live in an area that has a good fabric store, you can order things like this. Right here is a half round stick, and it's made by, I think, Golden Hands products. You can probably find it on Etsy, and it's like maple. It's been sanded nicely. It even could hang on the wall because it has this thing on the back. The other thing that I've done, I'm just trying to see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. If you have a lumber store, which most places do, this is a railing. This is railing, and what's really cool is that I bought a piece and I cut it. I have them cut it into lengths, and so I could have slid this underneath the seam so I could press them without making a big mess of this, and still be able to do my cutting without cutting into my strips. Okay, this is cheap and it's really easy. I use it a lot for like on this quilt that I've talked about. It had a lot of angled seams. I've used it on One Block Wonder quilts. I've used it on this one, which is hexagons, and it keeps the seam raised up so I don't mess up the other seam allowances around it. So anyways, but I'm going to put this on this sleeve board because I wanted a little wider surface. I have a choice. So I've got the seam here. I'm going to press it open, and you see, this is why I don't want the there to be a mark that's going to disappear, because I'm going to press this, and if I did put marks here that would disappear, I wouldn't have lines for cutting. Okay, so now I'm going to take my scissors, and these are Kai, by the way, Kai, some of the best scissors at a great price. They're made in Japan. So check them out if you can get some Kai. You might be able to buy them directly from kaiscissors.com. So anyway, I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to cut right across there, and you'll see the cuts line up because I lined up the X's here and kept them pinned together. And you'll see also that this seam goes parallel to the stripes, so it didn't matter which way it was because it was going to be parallel. That's why I did the other seam first, where the stripes had to match up exactly. Okay, so I'm just going to cut across here and cut across here, and then I'm going to cut the little dog ear here, and that dog ear is cut off. Now look at this. I have all this long piece of bias by doing two seams. The other thing, the other advantage of doing this continuous bias binding, and you can actually do a rectangle, you know, just as long as you create a parallelogram. But an advantage of doing the bias binding is that if you have a fabric, even like this, that looks the same on front and back, you don't accidentally put a seam on this side and then a seam on the wrong side. The seams are all on the same side. Now look at this. Here's a seam. You're not really going to notice. There's a seam. Do you even see the seam? You don't even notice it. This one's a little off. I didn't do it perfectly, but look at that. You can't see the seam. Look at that. So when we fold this, like usually when we bind quilt or whatever, I like to do French binding, which is doing double fold binding. So you get, you know, a little bit more strength to it. And the binding I'm going to do is going to be double fold. Also, sometimes I like to do just a little hint of piping in a seam, flat piping. And this is perfect because this is 3/4 of an inch wide when it's done. And if my seam's 5/8, I just match that edge to the edge of the fabric. I sew my seam and I get a perfect 1/8 inch reveal of binding. of piping, flat piping. So I'm going to go like this, match those edges, and I'm going to put the point of the iron there. Now the thing is, because this is bias, you'll see that this is kind of bending this way. I'm going to bring it this way. Let's just bring you over here so maybe you can see what I'm doing a little bit more. Of course, I'm going to do some length of this. I'm going to bring this here so this looks like it's too long. But the thing is, it's very easy to accidentally pull on the bias. You got to be very gentle with this stuff because the bias can stretch. Okay. Once I get a whole iron length on there, I click my steam button. You can use your burst of steam, or you could spritz it. Like I've got this really awesome misting bottle. You pull it, and no matter how you pull the trigger, it mists, and you can just hold the trigger and it'll just keep misting for a long way. It's awesome. They actually were designed for hair salons because I guess it's helpful for them to just mist the hair. Now there's a little disconnect at this end. I'm just going to match the edges the best I can. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just a little disconnect. So I'm just matching the edges, and because no one's going to see that, especially if I put this side against the fabric, this would get hidden. Okay, so I'm just going to try to do this. Now you can stop anytime you want, but at the very end of my ironing this, I'm going to roll it up, and I'm going to show you this cool way to roll it up. The other thing is, when I iron this, I tend to have more pressure. I lift up the front of the iron so it's not pushing the fabric. Like if I push in the front, I don't know if you can see, but it's pushing the fabric on my ironing board. If I have it a little raised up, it's not changing anything about the fabric. And this fabric is being on the bias, it can stretch. So I'm just going to bring that, and I put the point of the iron also toward the cut edges, because if I put the point of the iron toward the cut edges, it's going to, the later part of the iron is going to create my fold, and the edges will be even with each other. Oh gee, look at how much binding I'm getting. Isn't this cool? Just out of that 15-inch square. Of course, like I said, this is narrower than I usually do. Like on a quilt edge, I will go anywhere from really precisely 2 1/8 up to 2 1/2. Most of my students will do 2 1/2. This quilt, when Lori Q. Allison, the quilt I'm going to make, designed it, it looks like her binding is kind of wide, and it looks really good because it's green and a nice contrast to the rest of the quilt. So I'm probably going to do 2 1/2-inch strips. So I do a little wider seam allowance. Oops, that got underneath the leg of the thing. Okay, and but I'm just doing this as a sample. Like I said, I just made everything smaller to hopefully make it easier to fit in the camera screen and just get through this project a little faster. Because when I do that longer bit of binding, I'm going to have, you know, over 300 feet of binding, and it's going to take me a lot longer to do than this little bit, okay? All right, I'm getting toward the end. Okay, a lot of times also when I use this binding, I take off the little piece that's at the end. Okay, so like here, look at this. I don't like to have, like I usually fold it over before I do it. Well, that's just too close. So I would probably just remove this stitching and then fold this like this so that, anyway, I just wouldn't want a seam that close to the end. But I'm going to just do this and then do that later, take off that little section. All right. So now this is what I like to show you, is that I kind of do this rolling thing. I take the binding, and a lot of times I'll take the end that I want to be the last end I use. Now look at how close this is. See that seam? That's very, very close. So I would definitely get rid of this section. Okay. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to hold it here, and I'm going to roll it with my hands in it, making my hands go like this a little bit. It's like kind of like a kid's song, like this old man goes rolling home, and you do these emotions. I used to be a music teacher, so so this is what I'm thinking of. I mean, I was a kid too, and we would do those type of things. So anyway, so I'm going to go like this, and sometimes you'll find that it behaves better if it's on the floor, because it'll untwist itself on the way to your hands. So I'm going to go like this. Do you see that? And just keeping my hands pulling a little bit apart from each other, it keeps it tighter. All right. And I'm just going to keep rolling that. Whoops, I'm standing on it. How did I stand on it? I didn't think I moved. Oh boy. But anyway, I just love stripes on the bias when it comes to binding. And that's coming out of my little center thing, so I'll tuck it back in there. It just looks so dynamic, you know, much better than if it was straight. You know, I suppose it could look okay if it was, now look at that. You don't even see that seam when this is all done. You don't notice those seams because they're parallel to each other. Look at that. And see, there's probably going to be another seam. So you see like this, then I have this nice bit of binding here. And sometimes just to keep it, I'll take a thin strip and wrap it around and put a little bow in it or something like that. But it makes it really easy to manage this particular way. And so that's how I do my continuous bias binding. And you know, if you have questions, put them in the comments and I'll try to answer them as soon as I see them. And if you have any other videos that you'd like me to show you how to do, please let me know too. Thank you.